College of Business has done a fantastic job at engaging corporate partners to try to help you guys bridge that gap between graduation and your first job out in the workforce. So I hope you take advantage of that and appreciate all the work that they've done going into that. A little bit about Thrust Flight and about me. We are a flight training company in DFW. We are currently the largest provider of airline pilots to the regional airlines in DFW. So we take people that have never touched an airplane before and train them all the way through being qualified to fly at an airline. Right now we have about 350 active students in the DFW area. We are approaching 200 employees, and that's people divided amongst the flight instructors. That includes our maintenance department. That includes a section of the company that's training airline mechanics that are going to work on the aircraft for the Americans and the Uniteds. And this year we're going to fly about 50,000 flight hours, which exceeds any of our competitors in the space. It's a really cool time for our company in the space that we're in, because the industry is so lacking in pilots. It's a lucrative career, and we're positioned really well in the industry to grow tremendously over the next 10 years. I'm the Vice President of Operations at the company. I've been with the company since 2019. You saw in my bio up there that I come from a background in videography, and that usually raises a few eyebrows. And I want to talk about that a little bit because it's applicable to a lot of people that are in the supply chain management program. When I worked in video, my job was to find the locations that they were going to film and figure out the logistics of getting all of the junk to a parking lot nearby, getting it to where they were filming. I was a puzzle solver. I was piecing together logistics for a production company, and I'm doing basically the exact same thing now in flight training. And the takeaway there, I think, is logistics is a very versatile practice. You can work for almost any industry if you're good at logistics. There's never a shortage of a need for people that are good at solving puzzles. Does anyone know what logistics means? If nobody raises their hand on this one, I'm just going to assume y'all don't want to talk.
It's like management of resources.
Management of resources, that's a great definition. And there's a lot of different, depending on who you ask, you're going to get a different answer. But the concept of logistics is able to be applied through a vast number of industries. Most people think of it as, trucks, freight, which is in that industry, that's what it means. But you can apply what you're learning here at UNT in the supply chain management, you can apply it to a vast number of industries. And so that's kind of the path that I took to get to what I'm doing today. I'm going to talk this afternoon a little bit about, I've got two kind of concepts I'm going to try to get across to you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our company and what we do and the challenges that we face, because like I said, the main reason that the benefit we get from doing something like this is we want to get good talent. And so I want to tell you a little bit about our company and what opportunities there are in our company, answer any questions you might have about it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit at the second half of this about what I have seen so far as we participated in the internship program. I've interviewed over a dozen interns from UNT, and it's been a learning experience for me, and I'm trying to make it a learning experience for those that come. I'm going to take some of my takeaways from doing those interviews and shed some light on some areas that I think you guys would benefit to hear from. So about the company, the industry right now, flight training industry is a $1.4 billion industry. There are about 1,500 flight schools that all have their hand in that $1.4 billion across the country. And only about 33 of them are doing what Thrust Flight's doing, training ab initio from zero time to airline job. Boeing releases a report every few years that projects what's going to be happening in the industry. Their last report in 2022 predicted that there would be a need for over 600,000 new airline pilots. Right now, over the next 20 years, as the industry sits today, we have the ability to train about 60% of that. So we're not able to train the number of pilots that Boeing said in 2022 we're going to need in the next 20 years. That's really exciting if you work in flight training, because that means there's nothing but opportunity ahead, right? There's all this money to be made and not enough people to make it. So it's really exciting if you're in the situation that we're in. The $1.4 billion figure is what they're executing annually right now in flight training. If things keep growing how they've been growing, that's going to be a $4 billion industry by 2030, which is really exciting. And it gives a lot of opportunity to companies like Thrustlight that have the resources and the brand to expand and grow. And that's the challenge that I've been presented with in my role, is how do we do that? How do we take this company that was, when I started, we were just in Addison, Texas at one location, had about 15 airplanes. How do we take this and grow it to take advantage of what the industry headwinds are giving us? And there are a multitude of challenges that come with that. To grow a business like this, you have to have the ability to scale, right? And to scale, there's three things really, but we're going to talk about two that are really important, and that's systems and processes. You have to have processes that ensure things are happening in an efficient way, and you have to have systems that force your employees to do those things in the same way every time. You have to have, in our case, inventory. That's been a real challenge for us. The airplanes that we fly are about $500,000 per aircraft. And we've got a fleet of 30 right now. And they're hard to get. The money's not even the issue at this point. You can get the money with the figures I just told you, the potential that this industry has. The money's easy to get. It's the aircraft that are hard. We've got an order right now with Piper, who builds the primary aircraft that we train in, for 70 aircraft over the next 3 years. And it's over the next 3 years because that's as fast as they can produce the aircraft. The training aircraft that are used primarily in the industry are Piper CA-28s and Cessna 172s. The Cessna goes for like $700,000. It's nearly $250,000 more than the Piper, and we're buying those because we need the aircraft so bad. So inventory is a big challenge that we face in our growth path forward. You need real estate. This is a common issue that many of you have probably had in projects in your logistics program, where you've got to figure out what is the best place for me to execute my scalable program. So in our case, in aviation, we're looking at airspace in the area. Where do we have the best weather for training these students? Where do we have the best access to an FAA tower where they can do all of their maneuvers and practice talking on the radios like they're going to be doing at the airlines? We're looking at all that. I've looked at more U.S. Census data than I ever care to do again this year, trying to figure out where the money is for us to start putting new locations. You know, we're looking at demographics in Florida and in Arizona, on the east and west coast, looking at where we're going to be able to get the most students to be able to get the most money out of wherever we put our location. So we're looking at all the different real estate options there. We need to work on our marketing and our branding. You don't want to stand up a location in Miami, Florida, whenever you've only ever marketed in Texas, and then have to have nothing happen for 8 months before anybody knows who you are. You want that brand awareness before you get there. And that's a unique challenge that probably many of you working in the supply chain management, you don't have to really think about that in your projects. But when you get to a certain level, you've got to think about the whole picture, right? So we're looking at the marketing and branding in different areas. And then our biggest issue, and again, the motivation for companies like ours to do events like this is talent. It's hard to get talent these days. And you need all of this stuff to be able to grow and scale. But I want to focus on two of these things with you this afternoon. And that's the scalability and the talent aspect, because I think that's what you'll be able to get the most from me. That's how I can help you the best today. And scalability is really just logistics. We talked earlier about logistics being the management of resources, right? And the word logistics, if you look at it, it comes from the same Greek word as logic. And that's all that this is. It's looking at a problem and using logic to figure out the best way to solve it. And so that's what we're doing with our program as we scale our business to be a national brand, a national company. We're looking at the logistics of how we're executing on our problems. I grew up with a dad that worked, my dad worked in logistics my whole life, and I always heard it's just getting from point A to point B. And as you're solving a puzzle, that's really all you're doing. You're getting from an unsolved problem to an unsolved problem, point A to point B. And in our space, the way we're looking at that problem is we're saying we've got a zero-time student and we need them to be a pilot, point A to point B. So our job as we grow at ThrustFlight is to identify the best way to do that, where it's going to be as cost effective as possible to us, where the company can return our revenue. To do that, we need consistency. You've got to have a process in place that happens the same way every single time. If you don't have that, that makes your data useless. Does that make sense? If you're not doing something the same way every time, you can't look at your data and make meaningful changes because it's happening differently every time. So consistency is really, really important. Your processes that are set up to do all of this stuff need to be efficient. You want to hone in on your processes so that you're making them as efficient as possible every single time. You want scalability. Sorry, I need to just turn around and look at this. You want to be able to have processes that you can implement all across the country. In our case, we want to make sure that whatever we've done in Addison that has worked so well is happening the same way in Florida, is happening the same way in Arizona, California, wherever. We want to have good quality. And that comes down to what those processes are doing, right? What is it that makes up those processes that's ensuring the quality of the product we're putting out? All of this is driven by systems, processes, and talent. And I look at these things as kind of the triangle that drives our business. Our systems are enforcing the processes that we put in. Our processes are being implemented by the talent that we've got in place at the company. The talent is using the systems to make the processes happen. All three of these things are working together to grow this company, and it's the same way across all industry. You need these three things to be able to grow in any environment. We'll talk a little bit more here in a moment about what this actually looks like at ThrustFlight specifically, but it all revolves around these three things: systems, processes, and talent. And I drive that into my team every single day. If I've got a problem that comes to my desk from one of my employees, hey, we lost track of this student that didn't fly for a week and now they're behind and they're gonna have to fly these 3 extra flights just to get caught up to where they were. The first thing I'm gonna say is, why didn't our system catch that this person went a week without flying? What is broken in the process that we're using to schedule these students that made this person go a week without flying? Who was it that didn't use the process correctly that made this person go a week without flying? Every problem that comes to me in my role, I look at these three things, and every single time, if there's a problem that happens in the company, it's because there was a failure of one of these three things. And that's all logistics. That's all that logistics is looking at a problem using these three things to implement solutions. And there's different levels of implementation across all of this. And if you want to, I imagine most people in here are hoping to one day be a director or a higher level. That's where all the money is, right? Everybody wants to make money. That's why you're going to school and why you're looking at this industry. If you want to be a top performer in implementing all of this, you're going to have to always be learning new things. I have people on my team that have capped out at their growth at ThrustFlight because they figured out the way that they're going to do things and they are not interested in learning anything new. And nothing morally wrong with that. That's fine, but they're never going to be at the next higher level, because in order to be a leader of people implementing these processes and these systems, you've got to be learning new things. You've got to be learning how to do it better than you did it yesterday. And I look for that when I'm interviewing people. I'm trying to find people that are reading books, that are up to date with the industry and reading articles that came out. The FAA on Tuesday released a new category of aircraft, and it doesn't really affect my industry directly right now at all, but they released 800 pages to talk about what this is going to look like. 800 pages worth of regulations. I'm on page like 50 of it right now, and I'm going to try to have it all read by the end of the year. And I hate it, it's awful, but I've got to be up to date with what's happening in my industry, and that's just part of it. So have an open mind and be willing to learn as you're going through your career. You need to be able to be a jack of all trades in a sense. And this doesn't, in my opinion, this doesn't apply to people that want to find a comfortable job and stay at a position for their whole life, and you know, if work-life balance is more important than advancing your career, then feel free to ignore this. in my position today, I cannot make a decision on how we're going to change a process in operations without understanding how it's going to impact our accounting department. If I decide that we're going to fly people at a different frequency and it's going to change the entire way accounting works, I can't just make that decision and do it. I've got to know how everything in the company works. If I'm going to decide to change the number of people that we're hiring or change the interview process, I need to understand how that impacts HR and their resources. So being a jack of all trades helps tremendously in being able to rise up to that director or higher level. Learn effective communication. One of the biggest challenges that our company experienced as we were growing was nobody was communicating well. We went from a company of about 20 people where everyone was talking all the time to a company of nearly 200, and the communication strategies within the company did not grow with the company. And if you can develop the skill of communication, and I don't mean being good at networking or being a good conversationalist, but understanding that all of these different people that are involved in this organism need to be on the same page. The boat needs to be heading in the same, everyone needs to know which direction the ship's headed, right? If you can understand that concept and get good at knowing who needs to know what and communicating effectively across an organization, that's the kind of stuff that really separates the leaders from everyone else. So, some real world stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit, and I'm off the cuff here. Y'all ask questions if I'm going fast or don't explain something well. This is how we use all of that stuff I just talked about at Thrustlight. So what you see on the screen here is our scheduling software. That's one of those systems we were talking about. The scheduling software is a system that ensures we're utilizing our resources consistently the same way every time. Every one of those blocks that you see up there is a reservation. I've got a team of about 8 people that live on this every single day. And so there's about 150 names up there, 125, give or take. Each one of those events is a student that is going through a training course. So one of these people is working on their private pilot certificate, and they're working on solos. And that can only fly between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. Not because of any regulation or anything, but because we've looked at our processes and decided that that's the best way to do it. And we get data from that and might change it sometimes, right? But we've got those processes in place. So my people are looking at every single name on this list constantly and determining what is the best way for us to organize this day. Every day is a logistical challenge, right? Here are all the students we've got, here are all the instructors we've got, here are all the planes we've got. Let's see how we can do it.
What's the color coding for?
Color coding indicates different ratings. So I've got gray is an event that's already transpired. We color code it based on what rating the student is training on because the people that have been doing this for the longest determined that that was the best way to look at the schedule. I've changed that method 3 times in the last 6 years, and it's awful every time we do it because the entire team is like having to readjust how they look at it. And everyone here grew up on computers. You know how when you're looking at a system or a schedule like this, your brain kind of starts making these associations and it just becomes second nature. So it's a pain to adjust that. But we've changed it about 3 times. Right now we're trying this, and I actually will look at the data differently based on how we do this. So we were not doing a good job of scheduling all of our commercial pilots on evening flights, and that was why we changed it to be based on the rate. Before it was based on what aircraft they were in or something, and it was kind of useless. But that was our fix. Hey, our commercial pilots aren't flying enough in the evenings. Well, let's color code it, and then when we look at this, we say, all right, we need a whole bunch of red on this side of the schedule, and you can glance at it and determine that your schedule's healthy. That's a good question. So this is one of our systems. This is how I represent visually for our team the processes that these systems are in. So here on the right, you see 5 different columns. This is our enrollment system. So there's an enrollment process that this system enforces as students are going through. We get in big trouble with the FAA if we're training somebody that doesn't have a student pilot certificate. So to start your private pilot with us, you've got to make sure that everybody that's in that plane has their student pilot certificate. That's pretty hard to do whenever you've got 350 students. When we were a young company with less planes, we left it up to the instructors. Our instructors are people that just graduated the program. They're 20 to 25-year-olds. No offense to 20 to 25-year-olds, but that's scary. I don't like, we can get in trouble with the FAA if this 22-year-old kid doesn't do his job right. That was scary. So we developed this system where it is impossible for you to get on that schedule that we just saw, which drives everything, if you don't go through this process. So I've got a couple of people on my team whose job it is to move boxes across columns. And the system has been programmed to not let them move across columns unless a student pilot certificate has been uploaded. And that's just one example. There's a dozen different requirements in this process to move across columns. But this is a visual representation of those processes, and it's the system that enforces that process, and it's going to allow us to scale. So I told you before we left it up to instructors. There was a little while between that and this where we were doing it on paper. Can you imagine doing that, at 5 locations across the country that you don't have at all times of the day? So it's a key component of scaling is these systems and these processes. Here on the left you see some tiny line graphs that you probably can't read. The point of this illustration is to show the data that can be derived from these systems and processes. So you develop this system that requires people to go through in a certain way, and it's recording stuff as you go. And so if I've got a commercial pilot student, that certificate requires 3 things: ground, written, and flight. You need so many hours of ground, you need so many hours of flight, and you have to have an FAA written. There was a point a while back where we didn't know what the best way was to go about tackling those 3 requirements. We tried doing writtens at the end of the flight. So they would get all their flight hours required, and then they would sit on the ground for 2 weeks while they knocked out their written. And we tried all these different things. Ultimately, what the real answer is, it's different for every single person. But remember, we were talking about consistency earlier. That won't work. I don't have the resources to get somebody that knows this stuff well enough to sit down with every single student and determine the best way forward for them. So we had to figure out what was going to work best across the board. So, and this is a project that took 2 years, and we used our systems and we used the data that those systems provided to determine the right answer. But over the course of 2 years, we had our commercial pilots for 3 months. They would do the written first, and then they would do the flight. And then for the students that started over the next 2 months, they would do the flight first, and then they would do the written. And it's really easy to change those when you've got good systems, right? You just go into your system and you change the setting that allows that person to get on that schedule and say, all right, written's first. Don't let them get in this plane until they've done their written. Or flying's first. Don't give them a voucher code to take the written until they've done all the flying, right? When you've got good systems in place, it's really easy to change these things. And so over the course of 2 years, we tweaked with it, we looked at the data, and we said, okay, the best course is you do your written first, and then you do your flight and ground concurrently. That has improved our commercial time frame, the amount of time it takes students to complete their commercial certificate by almost 20%, which is substantial. That saved us a lot of money. And it was all because of these systems and the data that we got from those systems, and we improved the process based on the data that those systems got. Does that make sense? Y'all see the triangle I'm talking about here? And again, at the end of the day, all of this is logistics. You're figuring out how to get from point A to point B as efficiently as possible using that triangle we were talking about. Okay, I told you that I was going to talk about thrust flight specific stuff, and then I was going to tell you some of the stuff that I gleaned from this relationship with UNT and some of the interviews I've done with the intern. We're a small business. I think most people qualify as small business as anybody with 500 or less employees. 50% of the workforce is employed by small business owners. It's 46 to 48%. I think it's getting closer to 50 right now. Roughly half of the workforce is employed by small business owners. and the average small business has 20 or less employees. And the takeaway that I want you to get from here is most of you are going to be interviewing with an executive of a small business. Many of you will interview with the owner of a small business. This is a different interview than interviewing at Apple or interviewing at Meta or any of these big Fortune 500 companies. And I looked at some of the people that have come and given lectures here. I think that you've gotten some of those big corporate, y'all had an HR rep from one of them come sometime in the spring, I think. But I want to take advantage of my time with you here today to give you a perspective from the small business side, because it is a little bit different. Your interview at ThrustFlight, when someone interviews with us, they don't do an interview with HR 3 different times and then interview with a manager level position. You're interviewing with me and with the owner of the company. You're interviewing with the executive team because we're all going to be working so closely together, right? We're a small business, so you interview with a little bit higher ups a lot earlier in the interview process in the small business world. And this is kind of a soapbox moment because I've been interviewing interns from UNT a lot over the last 6 months, and I've learned a lot doing it on how I can help you guys, and I've got some takeaways that I want to share. So I'm going to give you kind of my perspective on what I've seen interviewing people from the business college. When you are asked, I want to do a little participation here. Please humor me on this. If I asked you what your career goals are, somebody give me an answer to that question in an interview. What are your career goals?
Oh, to be a CPA.
One more time?
To be a CPA.
To be a CPA?
Correct.
Okay, that's good. Anyone else?
To rise into a management position, leadership position.
These are great answers. That's why y'all raise your hands. I want to tell you some of the answers I've gotten that have driven me crazy. I want to make a lot of money, and I want to have a good work-life balance. I get those answers all the time. Guess what? Everybody wants to make a lot of money, and everybody wants to have good work-life balance. Of course you want to make money. Everybody wants to make money. I'm doing this job because I want to make money. Everyone wants to make money. Everybody wants to be happy in their life. When I'm asking those questions in an interview, what I'm trying to determine is what can this person do for our company? How are they going to fit into the culture? How can I help them achieve their goals and use that to get them to help me achieve mine? I've got a girl working for me that I interviewed her and I asked her that question, and she said, you know what, I want to be an airline pilot. I can't afford your program. I'm doing this job because I'm hoping that it can lead to something where I can go fly an airline in the next 5 years. So in her interview, she told me, like, look, I'm not planning on being here for a long time. I'm kind of wanting to use you guys a little bit, and that's great. I set up a great deal with her where I'm getting a key role filled in my company, and she's gonna be gone in 5 years, and I know what her goals are, so I'm getting her to train other people on the job that she's gotten really good at. And that's great. We're transparent with each other. We know what each other's goals are, and she has a passion for aviation, so it worked out fantastic. So keep that in mind whenever you're sitting in these interviews. I've had a lot of people in these internship interviews respond with, I want to make a lot of money, and I want to have good work-life balance. And there's nothing wrong with wanting those things, but every single person that I interview wants those things. So keep in mind what the perspective of your interviewer is whenever you're answering those questions. Okay, that was my soapbox. Now I'm going to get to the selection. When I'm interviewing a candidate, I want them to demonstrate a logistical mind, right? A problem-solving mind. I want them to come to the interview with a basic understanding of what my company does. I have done interviews where they did not know what ThrustFlight was, and it's a waste of everybody's time because they're not going to get hired, and I had to leave my office for 15 minutes to listen to them ask questions about what ThrustFlight does. So anytime you're interviewing with a company, have a really at least basic understanding of what that company does. Never go into an interview not understanding what your potential employer is wanting, what they're doing in the workforce. And I really enjoyed it when I'm doing an interview and they ask me questions about something specific that we do and come up with potential solutions. Now, usually it's terrible because they don't know the space, right? But I love sitting in an interview and hearing people they've got their wheels turning. They're thinking about what it would be like to be in the job that they're interviewing for and problems that they could have, and they're already thinking of solutions. I had somebody ask me about how we manage our fleet and keeping up. They wanted us to, they were suggesting we have a plane that never flies so that it's there for when a plane goes down for maintenance. It's a common practice in the industry, and it told me that they knew what they were doing. They did their research, they were thinking about things. We're not gonna do it because I've already tested that, and it winds up hurting us more than it helps us. But that was really encouraging to see in an interview that they understood our industry well enough and had researched it well enough to come to the table with some ideas. Whenever you're interviewing at a small business, one of your primary objectives needs to be to identify the culture of that business. At Thrustflight, we are a very competitive group, and we're very big on accountability. I think more so than most other small businesses. And if I'm interviewing somebody and I get the sense that they're not necessarily a competitive person, they're kind of just a sit down, go with the flow, and stay out of the spotlight kind of person, that's someone that might not be a good fit for our culture in many instances. And there's nothing wrong with that, it's just not the Thrustflight culture, right? And if you don't identify a company's culture early on, it's just a mess to work somewhere for 2 months before you realize that you don't fit in there, and now you've got to go start the whole process over. You're all probably looking at internships, and so it's a little different. This is a bit of advice I want to give you for as you move into the workforce long term. Pay attention to company culture and see if it's a good fit for you. This is another pet peeve item I have right now, and this doesn't apply to you yet, but you remember 50% of the workforce is employed by small business, and eventually you're going to be interviewing with a small business owner, and this is important. If I've got a resume and I see that they've got a different job every 2 months, I don't care what that job is, I'm throwing that resume out. Whenever a small business owner or a small business executive is sitting down with somebody that they're interviewing, they're not looking most of the time to just solve that one problem they've got, especially not with a college graduate. Anytime I'm interviewing a college graduate in that has a degree specific to what they're going to be doing, I don't want somebody that's just going to be a scheduler forever. You know, we went through those figures, we're growing. I'm looking for people that are going to grow with the company. And so the only way to do that right is to stay a long time, obviously. So in my interviews, I'm looking for people that I can see being at a much higher position than what they're interviewing 3 years down the line. Looking at a resume that has them job hopping every 2 or 3 months makes me think that that's not the person that can accomplish that. And then these are just some again, pet peeves that I've experienced going through people interviewing for internships. Do a cover letter. If I've got 20 resumes from UNT and it's all the same things, you don't have any workforce experience yet, right? I can't look at what jobs you've done to determine if you're a good quality candidate yet. I don't really care about your GPA that much. If it's over a 3.0, or they're all within the same anyways. So the cover letter is what I read whenever I'm going through the internship resumes. I look at the cover letter and I try to learn what kind of person that is. So write a cover letter. Don't use a template where you just replace the name of the company for every single company that you're sending resumes for. Show in your cover letter that you know what that company is. I would be a good fit for XYZ company because I enjoy solving problems related to what you do, et cetera, et cetera. The cover letter is your opportunity to show them that you picked their company for a reason, you've researched their company, and you've got ideas on how you can help them achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve. And then dress is important, and it's something that seems to be, I don't know if it's a cultural thing. Despite how I look, I'm actually like a whole generation above most of you. And when we were applying for jobs in our 20s, dress was extremely important. I'm getting a lot of people coming in baggy clothes, wearing the hats, and especially in marketing. Not really for operations, but in marketing we get a lot of people coming in with backwards hats and stuff. And you've got a lot to overcome in an interview if you're showing up dressed like that. And I would rather see a candidate walk in jeans and a tucked-in polo than in a really nice suit that's 3 sizes too big for them. So just, what appropriate attire is. I'm looking to see like, okay, if one day this person is gonna be going to meetings with investors for us, how are they gonna dress? Do they know what looks good? And somebody wearing a baggy suit is someone that I think, okay, they don't realize how silly this looks. And then, as dumb as it might make you feel, rehearse for your interviews. So, I was talking to somebody before we started here about how some of the interviews have gone. I have changed our interview structure for the interns from 30 minutes to an hour, because it takes about 15 or 20 minutes for them to get comfortable and talk and not be stammering over their words. And that's totally fine. You're new to this, you've done less than 3 interviews in your life or whatever. All of that's understood. But if you'll rehearse and practice talking to people about some of the common questions that we ask in interviews, you'll have an answer ready, you'll be a lot more calm whenever you're actually doing it, and it can make the interview process a lot easier on both parties if you've done some practice going back and forth with somebody or in front of a mirror, and just get yourself comfortable talking about the topics that are discussed in an interview. So if you'll do all of those things and practice, you'll look and come across a lot better in your interviews when it comes to small business. I don't have, this is my disclaimer, I don't have any experience interviewing from the corporate big business level. This is what I've experienced and what I've learned in our environment, and we're a company of about 200 people, and again, most of you are going to be at some point in your career interviewing for a position from a company about our size. So keep that in mind, do with it what you will. And that's the end of my slideshow.